We are standing by this morning with everyone watching that image. Joint Base Andrews, where President Trump is expected to depart soon for Alaska for the summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin over the war in Ukraine. President Trump summing it up by posting 2 words a short time ago: high stakes. No kidding. And ahead of the meeting, he expressed confidence, though, in ultimately being able to reach a deal. Here's what he said.
I think President Putin will make peace. I think President Zelensky will make peace. We'll see if they can get along. And if they can, it'll be great. You know, I've solved 6 wars in the last 6 months, a little more than 6 months now. And I'm very proud of it. I thought the easiest one would be this one. It's actually the most difficult.
Now, foreign policy experts say Donald Trump does deserve some credit for recent peace agreements and several conflicts, but stopping 6 wars, those experts say, is an exaggeration, or at least quite premature. Still, President Trump is confident very clearly that he is the leader who can get Putin to change course now. Joining me now is retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman. He served on the White House National Security Council in the first Trump administration, then became a key witness against President Trump during his 2019 impeachment over his dealings with Ukraine. He is also the author of, very appropriate for today, The Folly of Realism: How the West Deceived Itself About Russia and Betrayed Ukraine. Lieutenant Colonel, it's good to see you again. Thank you for being here. You wrote in the last couple of days that you have become increasingly troubled thinking about this summit, that the meeting will be a disaster, you wrote, maybe a major disaster. Why are you so concerned or sure that that will be the outcome?
Sure. So first, thanks for having me on. I think that Trump's description of this as high stakes is exactly right. It's high stakes for the Russians. It's high stakes for the Ukrainians, the Europeans, the U.S., really, frankly, all corners of the world. I think this is shaping up to be a disaster because Putin set the table for this. He's the one that encouraged this summit. He did that on the back end of this, noise about maybe ratcheting up sanctions and pressure on Russia. And this is supposed to be the outlet. This is supposed to be a way to fix that and kind of get that bromance between Putin and Trump back on track. But he has to deliver something. He has to make some sort of overtures towards peace. And I think Trump is willing to accept a lot of different parameters, some things that won't be acceptable to the Ukrainians. But the gap between what Putin is going to offer and what Trump is going to accept is still a chasm. Putin is looking for maximal gains in Ukraine. He wants these 4 territories that have been annexed. Trump wants something that he could present as a peace. And if none of that really occurs, then Putin's going to do a bait and switch to economic incentives, arms control agreements, and other things to paint this summit as a win. Regardless, he's met with the President of the United States. He's elevated on the world stage. He's normalized relationships. And if he needs to pivot back to this general theme that's communicated to the Russians, that Russia is in a state of war with the West, he's willing to live with that. So high stakes for all parties involved.
If you don't think President Trump can pull this off, I mean, what you're presenting is that no leader could pull this off because the Russian president is not willing to compromise and not ready to come to the table. But if President Trump cannot pull this off, what would do no harm look like for Ukraine out of this summit?
So there's a scenario in which Trump reads Putin as insincere. He accepts the fact that Putin promised one thing in trying to advance the idea of a summit, and then very, very quickly, even before, earlier in this week, he already retracted those parameters. And if Trump kind of reads that and says that he's being toyed with and he needs to look strong, he may very well end up ratcheting up sanctions on Putin. He may throw additional support behind Ukraine. I don't know if Trump has the stomach for hard. He wants easy wins that he could deliver. He's claiming, 6 different victories, bringing around peace. He may throw his hands up in the air and just walk away. And the best case scenario might be a status quo. Nothing really changes. The Europeans are kind of in the lead. Excuse me. And then you have a scenario in which Ukraine continues to enjoy some military support, sales through Europe, continues to enjoy some additional or continued intelligence sharing, but nothing really changes except for the fact that Putin has had his summit. He's kind of rebranded himself a little bit, and we basically showed up for no reason. The better scenario, of course, is fulsome support for Ukraine, but that seems like a far-fetched notion at the moment.
Again, it seems every possible outcome is on the table given all of the uncertainty going in. Given your background and expertise, Lieutenant Colonel, what would your advice be, and how would you be prepping President Trump as he heads in to meet with Putin, who has such a reputation of how he handles negotiations and meetings in the coming hours?
Yeah, so I've done this before. I've attempted to prep President Trump on numerous occasions in preparation for meetings with Russia, Ukraine, and so forth. It is not the easiest task. He does not take good prep. He does not understand the history. He doesn't care to understand the history. So when Putin starts spouting off about grievances against, from Obama promising X or Biden promising Y and then breaking faith, that's gravy. That's like red meat to Trump to kind of sink his teeth into. That's what happened in Helsinki. Putin advanced this idea that it was the intelligence communities that were lying and that there was no collusion, and Trump jumped at that. So it's notoriously hard to prep him. I think the best thing to do is just to point out that he could be embarrassed looking like a weak president and that he's being toyed with and played with. And that on that basis, he might take a tougher line. With that tougher line, he'll suss out whether Putin is sincere about peace. And if not, then he'll go ahead very quickly pivot to what we can do. Because Russia is in a relatively weak state also. They're not making major gains in this war. Their economy is brittle. If we levy sanctions on Russia, that puts enormous pressure on them to sustain this war effort. So there is definitely things that can be done if you frame this correctly to Trump. Thus far, it's not entirely clear that he's gotten that kind of good quality prep. I think he's looking for a relatively quick, easy win. I hope that some of these messages have broken through and that he can carve out a space where he's defending the U.S. national security interests, defending European interests, and we end up in a relatively decent spot, either status quo or better, undermine our own security.
Lieutenant Colonel, thank you so much for coming in and giving us that perspective. It's always important to hear. Thank you very much.